right, everyone, here we are again, back with another one, bringing you a comparison video between two bikes of two storied brands. One of them we have the Yeti SB160 versus this right here, the Ibis Ripmo at 160 millimeters of travel. To let you guys know at the outset, I have purchased both of these bikes with my own money. None of these are sponsored videos, so everything you see, I'm going to be able to just give you my own thoughts. It's exactly the way I'm interpreting the way both bikes are performing without any bias from any of the companies. However, I will let you know that if you're looking for one of these types of bikes, I purchased both of these myself from N+1 Bikes. Both of these are customized, and if you call N+1 Bikes, Sean really loves to do that, and they'll build it any way you want. And you won't regret your purchase if you purchase a bike from N+1 Bikes. I highly recommend them. So as we get into this video, my name is Jason, and I'm gonna take you on a little ride between both of these bikes. Let's see what you think. Give me your thoughts in the comments. Let's go.
Okay, everybody, by the numbers. I have included the numbers that are important to probably everyone. The number on the left slash what you're looking at is a medium frame, and the number on the right is the large. And this number glance, we'll call the Ripmo an extra medium. It's basically a large. Now, I want everyone to recognize that the numbers you see here reflect a Ripmo running a 170 millimeter front fork, which is what really adjusts the geometry. I've adjusted the numbers here to reflect exactly that. Now, if you want to compare the stock numbers to the standard Ripmo with a 160 millimeter fork, you can easily find that on the Ibis website. With that in mind, we can see that the top tube numbers, they're pretty close, but the extra medium Ripmo has a longer top tube. The reach is where it can get dicey. The Ripmo jumps from 451 in the medium to 473 in the extra medium. Now you lose about 5 millimeters from a large fork on the Ripmo, but the Yeti has a much longer reach in both large and medium. I think Yeti has a more reasonable reach number at 464 in their medium. Head tube angle is the same on both bikes. The Ripmo does lose about 0.5 millimeters in the seat tube angle from that larger fork, but I'll be honest, you will never know it when you're pedaling because it pedals just as well, if not better, than the Yeti does. The Ripmo still has a lower bottom bracket height, and the chainstays on the Yetis, they're much longer by 4 to 5 millimeters. Wheelbase is much shorter on the Ripmo by quite a bit. And you add all of those particular numbers that I just covered together, and that gives the Yeti a much more planted, stable bike, and it makes the Ripmo to behave with a more playful behaviors out on the trail. So that is what we're looking at by the numbers. They're pretty close in some ways, and then a little bit different in others, which is probably which gives them two different characteristics. Oh yeah, and in case I haven't said it, to get the Ripmo to be 160 millimeters of rear travel, you need to run a 230/65 rear shock, which is what I have right here for this test.
So one of the things right away with the Yeti is it's puts you in a great position for climbing. The seated position's just perfect, and for a 160 bike, it climbs really well. The bike kind of has a on top of the bike kind of feel to it. With a Vivid, the bike sits higher in its travel, and there's a strange thing about the Yeti when climbing for a 160 bike. When you keep it in the 10th and 11th gear, it seems to give you it's like an optimal, it just really has a lot of pep in that 10th and 11th gear. And these are the Noble carbon wheels. Yeah, these are the TR37s. For tires, running the Maxxis Minion DHR2s, and in the front, DHR 2.5. And as you know, the DHR2 is a 2.4, but it looks wider because of the profile Maxxis uses. Here I have the RockShox Vivid running right at 30% sag on this, which is exactly what's going to be on the Ripmo. I'm running about 240 pounds with 4 tokens in this Vivid. And the reason there's 4 of them is because I like the SB160 to be really playful. go over some of my key takeaways. The bike is super fast. The suspension allows you to pump into it just before hitting a jump or a berm. It's real easy to push into it and get a response that will pop back to you, allowing you to generate more speed. As I've always noticed about this bike is in descending, really how fast it is. It's really quick. I'm wondering if these wheels have something to do with it. These bird spokes save about supposedly 250 grams a wheel. I have got a few more thoughts regarding that descent just did. So with the shock and the ability to pump into it like I was doing, or like I can feel, it feels like you could easily hit the first 70% of travel through it, which is why the soft bump compliance really supple, especially with the Vivid. The last 15% is where the travel ramps up and it gets really stingy. But before that, like the first 75 to 80%, it's easy to access the travel, but it stays with the first 30 to 40 when you're climbing and such, and it gives you just a real supple feeling. Well, really stiff when climbing, not really an issue with bobbing. However, it does feel lethargic a little bit. And the interesting thing is it feels lighter. I haven't weighed them, but I think it's lighter than the Ibis is. I think it's due to the wheels. It wants to get out from under you. You got to hold on to this thing because it can get away quick. It's super fast. Okay, here we go up some climbs, and it handles this super easy, like no issues. It just grips in. So it does get bucked around a little bit, especially for the platform being 160. However, trying to keep a balance to it, it can get bounced around off of its line. Now, granted, some of you are going to say, well, he's running 4 spacers in the shock. True, but the balance I'm trying to maintain is a bike here that I can get off the ground pretty easily with 1, even 2 spacers. The bike is really stuck to the ground. It doesn't like to get off the ground. It's a racy bike and it wants to stay planted and it wants to fly. And that's actually a cool thing, you know. Its speed is the name of the game with this bike. The difference between this shock and the Fox X2, which I switched out for this one gives you much more compliance, much more dampening, much more softening and composure on the trail. The small bump compliance on this, wow, super soft, really nice. Some of that compliance, they say, bird, is due to their wheel or their spokes, which is supposed to make for a more softer ride. Through switchbacks as well, it's easy to maintain and get through switchbacks on the climbs. So I want to make a mention to MTX pads. Running the reds front and back here on the Yeti. On the Ibis I have the reds up front and the golds in the back. Highly recommend those. This bike does not carry the speed as fast as the Yeti does. You can tell. It's easy to get into the air. It's easy to lift the front wheel. It's very agile, very agile. And it feels like the travel is a little bit more stingier. It's a little more progressive than the Yeti is. However, the speed on this bike is pretty deceptive. Doesn't feel like you're going as fast as you might be. Observations off that run. I don't feel like it was carrying speed like the Yeti was. Now, I wonder, is that due to the wheels? I may have to do another run with the Noble wheels, see if that makes this bike just as fast as the Yeti. I do feel like the Yeti was easier to push into its travel. The Ripmo might be stingier to give up the travel. As I just checked the ring, as we look at it right there, it is probably at about 155 that's been used. This bike, I'm running about 31% sag. I think because I'm running it at 160, I might be able to get away with 32% sag. However, looking at the ring, the Ibis doesn't feel like it's blowing through its travel. It feels very progressive. So when it comes to climbing with this thing, because of its nature to be really progressive, it climbs really well. And like I said, this Taki Chan, if you look at it, it is a little bit more rounder compared to, and it's a 2.4. The Verdict I have up front 2.5. It's kind of a square, more square on the edges versus the DHFs. It's kind of an opposite trade-off. But no, this thing climbs extremely well, hooks up well on traction. One of the things I've noticed is it compared to the Yeti, this climbs with more of an edge to it. It's got more of a juice to it. Your legs don't feel as wiped out. You feel more energized. That's how I feel. I feel more energized. I don't feel as worn out. And several of the rides that I've done with this compared to the SB160, this has outdone it. And when I get up to the top, not that I'm even trying to, it just feels a whole lot more energetic and snappier when it comes to climbing. And I just feel, when I get to the top, not as tired. Sometimes on the Yeti, you feel it. And even though the Yeti's got those faster rolling wheels, I'm beginning to wonder right now if that might be a moot point. I don't know if I said it already, but the Ripmo has more of a in the bike feel rather than on the bike like the Yeti does. Yeah, I can already tell just changing the sag points, that makes it feel more like the Yeti. Downhill, soaking up some of that chatter, but I don't feel this still keeping speed as fast as the Yeti does. Yeah, getting up this felt much quicker, no chore, up this jaggedy stuff. You know, to be honest, letting out that sag just a little bit, it feels just like the Yeti. And one thing about the Yeti, it seems much quieter. Got all those cable ties. The Ripmo doesn't have that feature. Yeah, this feels a lot like the SB160 now. Just changing out that air pressure, the way it's absorbing stuff. When climbing with the Ripmo at this new sag point, I'm not encountering a whole lot more pedal strikes either, but I think it's due to the fact that the bike sits high in its travel versus the Yeti. I encounter pedal strikes on that, but not with this. I got to admit, running this at about 8% sag, this feels very much like the Yeti. I can't even tell the difference The only difference is by speed that the Yeti carries. But agility, climbing ability, not affected on this. I think the starting point on the Ripmos to begin with, I think 30% is actually a starting point.
Why compare a Ripmo to the SB160? Well, some of you who have asked me to do this, but on the other hand, many don't know the Ripmo can be run at 160 millimeters of travel. I also believe that 160 millimeters of travel really is the cutoff for long days in the saddle that's non-e-bike, and for backcountry day adventures, anything more really, and it's for long days in the saddle, and it can be really exhausting. Now at the end of the day, there is no perfect bike, but some are close. With that said, who are these bikes for? At 160 millimeters of travel in the rear, both of these two bikes can be on the lines of doing some trail rides, and will most definitely be perfect for enduro rides and park days. The Yeti. If you value all-out straight-line charging speed and may consider racing in bike parks, the Yeti just might be for you. If you value a bike that will stick to the ground, the Yeti might be for you. Remember, you can run less tokens in the rear shock for an all-out traction machine on the SB160. You can also run more tokens in your shock to create a more playful feel in the SB160, which is where I felt the bike shine. The Yeti will feel more plush than the Ripmo with the least amount of tokens in the air shock. The Yeti can do all-day backcountry riding, but may have you wishing for something snappier for the climbs in those long days, but it has plenty of anti-squat for a great climbing performance. So it won't climb like an SB140 or cross-country or trail bike, but for the category look, it's a great climber. However, downhill on those backcountry days, you will love its ability to charge fast downhill. The Ibis Ripmo. If you value popping off rocks, jumping off everything, easy wheelies, and agility, the Ripmo might be for you. This quality of the Ripmo might be due to the shorter chainstays and the shorter wheelbase. Makes it really snappy, poppy, all of that. The Ripmo will feel really plush with the least amount of tokens in the shock, but it won't feel as deep a feeling as the Yeti for ultimate traction. You can adjust this to your tastes, and both bikes climb well, but the Ripmo does it better and will leave you with more energy at the end of a climb. But you can easily find a balance because it is so progressive at the end of the suspension stroke. For all day backcountry rides, I would recommend the Ripmo. It makes those climbs a breeze, and it's going to get you downhill with plenty of playful party feelings. Between the both, I find it difficult to say which is better at 160 millimeters of travel. They both do some things better than the other one does, but both have a balance. I personally value climbing, and both of these do it very well, but the Ripmo does it best. I also love descents, and both do it well, but the Yeti takes the edge here, and it might be due to the speed and that longer wheelbase that the Yeti has. Value. With the Yeti, they have two options. The C version, which is a more affordable carbon version, and then the Turk version, which is their lighter, high-end carbon. Ibis does not have any different versions of carbon. They only use one. The Yeti frame, that starts out at $4,800, and the Ripmo frame starts at $3,699. So basically the Ripmo frame is $1,100 less for a frame. When comparing the EXO transmission builds, the Ripmo again is less expensive. So that is something to consider as well. They are both premium bikes, and both of them look amazing in color options and frame aesthetics. The Ripmo does have a frame storage, if that's important to you, but I'm kind of glad that Yeti hasn't gone this way yet. It looks cleaner, and it keeps it a little lighter. So, look everybody, these are the bikes, and I hope this helps you to compare the pros and cons of both for some of you who were considering this. Until the next time, have a blessed New Year's, everyone. We're out of here.